On behalf of the Wikwemekong Board of Education, I welcome you all to the 20th Annual Hub Center Powwow.
Yeah, I should check on USB, make sure it works. There was one presentation this morning, we couldn't get all the stuff up, so.
And then the other is your USB keys, right?
Yeah, you can just throw it on the desktop, the file that she wants.
I'm assuming it's the one file that's there? Yes. Is that right? Is it the YouTube?
The video that's on there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the only thing on there. So.
Perfect. And then
Yeah,
we'll
he
just do
put it
this
in
one.
a format that I can upload it onto. I didn't get a chance to upload it onto YouTube yet, but so it's still on the stick.
But it'll play.
But this is the one I just wanted to
Okay.
play basically in the background as after we play the piece where he talks.
While you're speaking? Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe who controls the volume of the audio for this? Okay. So I will pay attention. Just turn it down so it's not very.
Yeah, because it starts off with the drumming and.
Perfect. So now wait, this one's.
Yeah, because what the second one does is show the content that we show on our. It's a sample kind of some of the content that we show. Which one called? Unceded territory.
I know.
It's a long name, yeah.
I don't get to make
it used to be Wikwemekong.
Okay, that's what I have written down.
Yes, but they actually changed it to Wikwemekong.
I'm spelling it phonetically, so.
Which one's presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Wikwemekong?
Unceded territory.
So are you speaking first? I'll just minimize it for now, so it's just gonna be right here.
Oh, it's not a problem. I can go back.
And then it's W3Y.
So it's you want me to get the USB in there?
No, I'll take it.
It used to be yeah.
And that's all you need on it?
The presentation one?
Yes.
Okay, so it's first tell, right?
Do you guys want to speak first? You want to speak first? No? Okay. Doesn't matter to me.
I have, I'll tell you the order I have.
Who do we have?
Well, I just went from the list that was provided on the website.
There we go.
That's what I'm.
So who's first on the list?
So I had Anne-Marie first, then Liz, then myself, then Lisa, and then John. But I think we can be flexible.
Yeah,
so
if it's okay, I could.
If you really want to go first, does somebody really want to go first?
If you don't want to, just. I can go first. Whatever. So I'm first.
And so the format is that each speaker has 12 minutes, which is not a lot of time. you
And
texted
usually
me
pretty
last
good
night,
with
and
stuff
I
like
was
this,
like,
but if something goes off.
Okay,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not the greatest
and
either,
then
but I
you're
can
like,
try.
hey, we're in Ottawa.
Well,
There we go.
Oh,
I'm Maddie. Hi.
that is so
I'm
funny.
good. How are you?
She has a phone.
John? I'm Lisa Murray.
Oh, she's
from
cookie.
Connect.
Oh, so I think
Which
I
is
have
4 hours
your number
from,
in my phone twice. One is
Do
good.
ya?
I don't know.
Good.
Anyway, so.
Is this my seat or what?
whichever seat is
Whatever
your,
seat
every
you're
seat
I
in.
is
want to
yours.
sit beside my good friend Leif.
All right, John.
Hi, I'm Lisa.
Nice to meet you. Lisa.
Nice
My
to
name
meet
is
you.
Leif.
Late?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
TVC.
TVC-TK for the TV, the community to Miskamang, our region, and King was another region.
So you're in which area?
We're actually in Quebec. We have a bridge separating between the two borders, Quebec and Ontario.
So you're part of the.
John, do you have any AV or
Exactly.
anything that you'd like us to
We
get
had-
ready
One of
for?
the only ones that produce in English.
We
And
produce
so
in the two
what I
languages.
have
We're,
is
No, no other ones
chief
produce in English.
executive officer,
No,
to look at
no.
office.
yeah, the rest are all French.
Wawatation. We have multiple.
Okay, so just say the chief executive officer, Wawato.
I think when
And I have the
was doing the
European Christian
survey
Society.
Wawatation. Wawatate
Wawato.
means it's a Cree word
So
meaning
much prettier when you say that.
it's a Cree word meaning northern
To
lights.
where?
Yeah, which
Is that what Wawa, Ontario is nearby?
No, we're not.
Wawa
We're,
is
we're actually
Ojibwe word for
97.
peace.
Yes.
Oh,
Wawa.
oh wow. Oh.
In Cree, they're Niska.
Okay. So
We
does
have
this sound
to
good?
produce 4
I'm
hours
gonna speak last, okay?
of
That's okay.
Yeah, that's totally fine with me.
shows or news.
Okay, so I'll
Plus we run
try and
advertisements.
introduce you. And
But,
I'm going to introduce
that's
everyone,
part of our
and then
funding, the way we
Anne-Marie
give
will
us our
speak.
grant is
Oh,
to
I think
produce
that
4 hours.
he's going to join for
And
now.
you don't use the Lucky Beat station.
I'll double check. You want to be last for sure. I have you last on my list anyway.
Perfect.
Communications of First Nations people, communities of Anishinaabe-Aski. Anishinaabe-Aski?
Yeah, asking.
Anishinaabe.
Asking.
Is that Anishinaabe? Oh.
Okay.
So what is Anishinaabe then?
That's Ojibwe for people.
Oh, okay.
They're all based in the Algonquin languages,
Okay.
so they're very similar. It's a change of letters, some,
Phonetics and-
but the transliteration will be quite different because everything is relates to the environment of the
Okay.
people speaking the language, so it will change.
Right. So like literally
Yeah.
where you are affects the way you speak.
I have like dozens of words for smell.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it has different times and environments, right?
Obviously.
So whether it's melting or it's coming down, it's big, it's
Like that hard
yeah.
crusty snow that's in
Yeah.
there.
So it's,
It's really interesting.
well,
Okay, so
guess we can turn this one on here.
Yeah, turn my volume off, but I just need to do something.
so Lisa, do you have a preference? Anne Marie is going first. John is going last.
John's going last?
Yes. Do you have a preference?
Whenever. Throw me in whenever you want.
I like
Throw me under
All
the
right.
bus.
All right. No throwing you under the bus, but I'll get you in there.
So John's going last. So he's going to make up for all the time we don't use.
Was that the okay?
Wow.
Because I can
That
do
was
that.
last name. It's getting a little tight here.
Where are you from?
Timmins.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Friends up and around that area.
Yeah.
Well, Timmins-Hurst, all
Yeah.
over the place.
Yeah. And of
Wait.
course, the old post for Waukesha Reserve was in Timiskaming.
It was?
Yeah. And they're
Timiskaming, New Liskeard, or Timiskaming
Quebec.
in Quebec?
Off
Okay.
the big activity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're speaking in English today?
Oh yes.
And is Leif speaking in English today?
I believe so.
And is Anne-Marie in English today?
Yes.
I'm in English. I just simplified it for you.
It's totally up to you.
Well, I put the titles in French, kind of throw that in.
Yeah.
Especially because one of the ladies that's going to be coming in
I think in the program it says that you're presenting in French. So if you want to,
Okay,
it's
okay. It's,
it's totally up to you. Just don't feel like you
that's
have
what
to
she had
present
told
in
me to.
English.
She had
Okay.
whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
So we got like 12 minutes or whatever to do the whole speech.
That's right. Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, should have gone through that.
And then
I will
then it
eat
goes
up
to
less
questions.
time. Mine is really short. So.
Okay. 'Cause I don't know if I have like a full 15 minutes of. All right, no worries. Okay.
No,
It'd be like
Lisa's got us covered over there. If
yeah,
we're
I
not,
have to
if we're not,
But even, even the session before, the gentleman that presented, his was about 8 minutes or something. So
I think that's
somebody
where
else
mine
made
is
up the
about.
time.
You guys all have beverages. You're good.
Yep. Where are you from?
I'm from Manitoulin Island.
John Gagnon from Wawate Media Communications.
Hi, John. Pleased to
Yes.
meet you. I'm with First Tel. We
Right.
handle the telecommunications and broadcasting
Wow,
in Wiki. So
huge.
And I'm Lisa from Timiskaming, Quebec, sorry.
pleased to meet
Pleased
you.
to meet you.
I know Ian Pelche.
Oh yes,
Yeah, I worked with Ian Pelche at the men's school years ago.
yeah. He.
I think he's working in social welfare now.
I think I
Yeah.
think he's over with the Ontario Works Department.
Yeah.
I believe that.
So
Yeah.
how's it going there with you guys?
Not too bad.
Yeah.
We've done some changes.
Yeah.
With the First Tel with First Tel.
Yeah.
So they brought me on board a year ago, and they did which I'll be talking about is rebranding of the telecommunications and
Sure.
broadcasting to modern ages. I was telling the girls, I said, found Gordy off VHS 5 minutes ago. So we're looking at the cactus system that we
Sure.
have for the
Yeah.
free.
It's a good system.
Because we run our community channel on firstel.ca.
Yeah.
So you can click on
Website
our website
and watch the
and
streaming live.
watch the community
That's
channel.
what we're looking at doing, but also integrating it with television
Yeah.
transmission. For us, like it's how we control our, the information going out and
Yeah.
preserving the language. Are you guys are you doing it in Ojibwe or is it predominantly English?
It's a mixture
Good.
of things. So like we'll do go out and interview authors in the community,
Yeah.
different things that we do.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what percentage we do some of it because it's so
I was just looking for somebody to ask that question to, but I don't know anyone here. So thank you, Lee.
Yeah. So it's we're full like our radio broadcasts are 90% free.
yeah.
It's easier this way.
We used to have the radio channel too,
Yeah.
and keep it. They don't have it anymore. And from what I understand from Korea was they're having a really hard time getting somebody to basically
To run
man
it.
and to run it, right?
Yeah.
And to really keep it free.
Yeah.
So I think it just kind of fell by the wayside. So in our programming,
Yeah.
I'm
Like you
hoping
need a
that we
good
can,
coffee or something.
through some of the stuff that
Where'd
we
you drive
do
in
is
from?
I
we can
You live in Ottawa?
get some stuff
Running.
running. Yeah, and
That's quite a.
bringing in a person on board who's going to be handling healing and wellness
And
component.
how did you get involved with this?
So she'll be going
I'm
out
the
in
station
she'll
manager
be going out in
at
the community and interviewing some of the women
we
in the traditional ceremonies
and then when they were doing this,
incorporating all this stuff on our
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah.
My speech is starting with this deterioration of the language in where parts of our
So you
network
head
we
back to
can
Montreal?
measure
No,
where
Not
no,
tonight?
no, no,
still
no.
fully
Well, I live
integrated
here.
in the community.
Yeah.
You were
And in other
in.
some
Yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah.
communities you can see where there's a
Fits.
deterioration.
So I'm back here tomorrow all day.
So to speak about
Yeah.
multilingual
Whereabouts do you
programming
live?
for us
Canada?
is almost
No, I live
More than
like you need to do a
Okay.
coast to coast to coast
My
study
son
to
comes
find
from,
out
he's
where it's
third
still
grade
predominant
university.
and where isn't, so we know
Okay,
what
that's where we are
we're
located.
That's right, okay. He's in
So I'm
civil
kind of starting
engineering.
this whole speech with, my
Here.
grandmother went to residential school, so my father
Bilingual,
not
he's
doing
fully
English.
bilingual.
And it was taking away at that,
Maybe he
at
already
that level of shame if you still don't have
Yeah, I
it.
doubt he does.
You know the whole story, right? Maybe a lot of these
His name
people
is
don't
Jeremy
know that
too, but
story.
I doubt he does.
So
Okay.
in order to, in order for us to know where we stand today, there needs to be a benchmark created and then a study from that
term for them to use, you know.
because they're closer
Yeah,
to the
Restart,
urban centers
try
with one of
again.
those isolate.
Yeah, maybe just close that window.
That's right. And there's people who are from who don't
Unplug the computer
understand
later if
music.
you don't need to use it.
yeah.
I'm gonna use a different.
Different area of the language, right?
I don't wanna be blamed for
We need to see how
exploring
the
the
North
theater.
Shore travel does with that language recognition. So there has to be.
Don't delete mine there on
Huge.
purpose.
I know, I'm saying.
I still have the USB though.
And it's on a dual screen.
Exactly.
She said for $8.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I knew that before I start my speech. But you know what? But you know there are areas that lost it, so your area could be helping other areas, even up as you know the Thunder Bay.
Do you have a preference when you
I
go?
noticed that the northern
Okay,
communities
so
up,
you're somewhere in the middle?
the Ojibwe communities up north of Thunder Bay, still very predominant, strong language there, just like we do. But it seems like anywhere that's real close to urban areas, you know, the English language is completely integrated.
Yeah.
You know, there's a major loss, and you know, with reconciliation. So I'll be ending my speech with the recommendations from the TRC,
Yeah.
which was, you know, our languages need to be respected fully, and you know, like families like mine who were totally assimilated into the white culture,
Yeah.
you know, we lost it. You know,
Well, that's what I know. I'm from the 60s skateboard and
so
I
and
know.
if we're talking reconciliation, that means reconciling our languages through media. So, you know, like partner companies like Huawei, we should be getting together. We want to do a major national conference with all the communications companies, First Nation communication companies.
It's the only
yeah,
downside of
because
them.
see, first time we're all across Ontario. A lot of kids are all
Right,
on the telephone companies.
well,
You can get, if phones you can get Bell, you can get telephone, right? Landlines. So one of the things that we want to do, one of the things we wanted to do is we want to take our commercial and get it translated into CIHP or
yeah, that would be,
send it out to
and
the north and north is just
on our radio station
yeah,
as
our
well.
radio stations.
Well, you know what, I'll tell you, I'll give you my card, and we can, that would be awesome. That would be so awesome.
He's always this guy
Competition
Emma.
always there,
Yeah.
and it brings prices
He's
down.
got a cushy job.
That's that benefits. So,
Hi.
He can hear you.
No, I made sure I was there. I was there.
like a multimedia management in the morning, and then
You
I'm
live
flying to
tweeting?
Toronto in the afternoon. So.
Yeah, well, we get hit with a massive snowstorm there. We just missed it on we thought we were driving over. It seemed like we were driving into it, but
Yeah, right.
anyways, so
Cool.
we're some big timber bodies in there.
Stragglers out there. This is it. I thought I'd have a bigger draw than this.
Yeah,
What the heck?
Now they didn't print your name in big.
No, you won't. You'll be fine. No.
None of them want to be the teacher's pet.
Sorry. Let's follow the rules here. So I think what we're going to do is first I guess somewhere in there I'm supposed to speak to.
Somewhere in there.
We'll see. We'll see. We're running late. Maybe I just cut myself out of the presentation.
I think we better go get people from the other room. Start recording.
We've been changed.
Like poaching from
Hey?
the other panels.
Yeah. Let's just go poach other people. You don't. So.
Well, that's the whole reason John's there was to say.
There we go.
Okay, I think we are going to get started because we are running late. Welcome to the multilingual programming panel. My name is Erin Flynn. I'm the station manager at CHO, which is the independent community radio station at the University of Ottawa. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to tell you the order that they are speaking in. They have about 10 to 12 minutes each. And then afterwards, we'll have time for questions. If you have a question, please come to the microphone so that it can be captured on the recording. So we will start. On my left is Anne-Marie Sanford, who is the Communications Business Manager from, I hope I say this right, Wikwemkoong, unceded territory. Am I close? Wikwemkoong, unceded territory. They host First Tel TV5. It's a community-owned and operated First Nations television channel distributed on the community's cable-operated and owned network. Beside Anne-Marie is Laith Marouf, who is a longtime multimedia consultant and producer, currently works for the Community Media Advocacy Center and is serving as the coordinator of the independent community television ICTV in Montreal on a project to secure a multilingual community television license. And then on my right is Lisa Morin, who is from TVCTK. She's an executive secretary who has volunteered for community for over 25 years. She's been president of the local community channel for 6 years and a member of the board of directors for another 10. The community channel that is known now as TVTCTK, which is in Temiskaming, has been around for 27 years, and it was formerly known as CCTV 13, and it changed its name to better suit the community that it was serving. And last but not least is John Gagnon. He's the Chief Executive Officer for Wawate Native Communication Society, which serves the communication needs of First Nations people and communities of Anishinaabe Aski Nation, and it does so through newspaper, radio, and television programming and production services. So we're going to start our discussion today with Anne-Marie.
Ani, Bojo, Anne-Marie Sanford Dishnakas. I'm from Ondak Omni Conning First Nation, actually, and I'm the communications business manager for First Tel. And First Tel is a telecommunications and broadcasting company located on Manitoulin Island. And we also handle First Tel TV5, which is the broadcasting component. You can start the video there. One of the important pieces that we incorporate in the Aboriginal content is we like to film within the community of Wikwemkoong, and we produce videos that we air on our community channel. You can go on firsttel.ca and click on the TV icon, and you can see some of the programming that we do within our community. It's not playing? I was going to show you a clip here, and it's the chief speaking in the community, and he's speaking in the language. Is our Ogama chief, Duke Pelche. You can just play the other one if that one's not going to play. Technical difficulties. So one of the pieces that we do is, as I indicated, is we like to show cultural diversity in our community, and one of the important pieces for us is to get that information out into the community. We run a information scroll on our community channel to update the community of what's going on in the community. It's not gonna play either. What?
I don't know, we did try this.
It was working before. We'll just give her a minute here. us to play from the stick? Can you grab the yellow USB? My apologies.
It's not your fault, it's the student loan computers. Probably watch too many things that they shouldn't.
Yeah, it might be interfering with it. Our technician worked really hard to produce this too for you guys.
That's it, but the VLC is popping right there, half open, so it's also crashed, it seems like. But I would.
We've been Skyped out.
We're entered the twirly circle forever mood right now.
Okay. I think what we'll do is we'll just continue. But anyways, the concept with our Aboriginal channel is we want to get the information out there. So we'll go out there and send our cameraman out there to interview elders in the community. They've been doing a lot of work on the treaties within Wikwemikong and getting information. And so interviewing the elders and getting that history has been really important. And we share that information on our channel. One of the other major factors within Wikwemikong is that they have a strong connection to the language within the community. About 90% of people within Wikwemikong speak the language and are very fluent. And I was just saying to John earlier, I said, Wikwemikong is an isolated community. It is on Manitoulin Island. And there are people that, elders there who have never left the community, and they're very strong in the language. We try within our office to ensure that we have staff that can speak Ojibwe, and they're fluent. And Wikwemikong has 2 schools that they teach that right from kindergarten right up into high school for the language. And they have been able to produce an Anishinaabewin language app that you can purchase on google.ca to learn the Ojibwe language. And so they've moved great strides in getting that information out there to the younger generation and people who want to learn about the language and sharing that knowledge. So that is basically what we do with First Tell TV5. First Tell TV5 came out of formerly Wiki TV5, which is the community channel that has been running since 1989, about 26 years in our community. We're very grassroots, and we like to throw a little comedy within some of our programming, and we have a cameraman that's been there for many years, and he's got quite a sense of humor, and so we produce a wide variety of programming on our channel, from going out to fishing derbies that we film. We have Christmas telethon that we film and fundraise for the community for school scholarships, and that is done in the language as well as both Ojibwe and English. So we have musicians that come out, and that's coming on this weekend. So we live stream a lot of our information as well on our firsttell.ca, and we're just getting into this newer technology and using social media as part of moving forward and with technology. And last year, as an example, our powwow we live streamed, we only had 1,500 hits on it. And this year, we live streamed it. It's on the internet, so it's accessed worldwide, and we had over 9,000 hits. And that was with very little advertising. And so we know that that people are really interested in what's going on within First Nations communities and wanting to learn more about our culture and the language that we have to offer within Wikwemikong. Is that my 10 minutes? I'm close. Yeah, so that's basically what First Tell is, and so we are moving forward, and we're looking at improving how we can get that information out there, and basically the language is really, really important in Wikwemikong, and I think that's part of what this multi-language workshop is about, is providing that information and to share that with you. And even when they do ceremonies and different events, they will speak in the language and then translate it, so that everybody gets that opportunity to hear that in our community. We are looking to expand our community channel. Right now our community channel is only in Wikwemikong, and so the importance of live streaming through firsttell.ca to get that out there is important for us. And so we're looking to increase our subscriber to be an island-wide Aboriginal community channel on Manitoulin Island. So I don't know if anybody's familiar where Manitoulin Island is, but it's between Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. You can access it by the Chinoo or the Chichimon out of Tobermory, or you can get through it through the mainland from Sudbury. It's about an hour and a half from Sudbury. We have a high population of tourists that come in the summertime, a lot from Europe. So a lot of our hits that we got on our powwow were from France and Germany and Italy, tourists that come to the island, and that they want to be able to see the powwow that is run on the long weekend. So if you ever looking for something to do on the long weekend, you can just click on firsttell.ca and check out the powwow in Wikwemikong and see some of the work that we do in our community. Chimigwich.
I think our other multimedia may work, but that did not. Sorry, Anne-Marie. So next up we have Laith Maroof, who's going to share his experience.
Yeah, and the PowerPoint. Oh yes, perfect. That's it. The PDF. Ah, perfect. All right, my name is Laith Maroof, and as I was presented to you as the coordinator for ICTV Montreal. Before I go into ICTV and the work that we're trying to do there, maybe I can give you a background of why we are trying to license a independent community television in Montreal. I worked as the executive director of CUTV at Concordia University between 2010 and 2013. I was the executive director, and I helped build the station where there wasn't a station before, actual television programming grid.
And at the outset of before the strike started in 2012, the Quebec Spring, the Maple Spring, whatever you want to call it, we, looking at the students, we understood and knew that it's going to be a serious thing and it's going to come. So we developed, looked at technologies that can help us to actually do live broadcasts, simultaneous live broadcasts from the street, mobile, from within the demonstrations, in full HD. And we researched, we did found technologies that we actually had to adapt and modernize to fit our need. Now nobody has ever used that technology in the way we did. And the result of it was a total loss of control of message by the mainstream media. We were receiving around 100,000 simultaneous viewers a night, whereas TVA or RDI or CBC in Quebec, their biggest daily news, they can barely reach 10,000 simultaneous viewers. So what was important about this programming and was not that it was only live and it was in a full journalistic package where the community actually spoke the most. There was total interviews constantly with the people in the street, is that we decided to purposefully break all the stereotypes about the solitudes of communities, of languages and ethnic and so forth. So if you remember the student strike, for a lot of you in the English Canada probably didn't hear that much about it, but the way it was presented was, the Francophone students, and look at the rest of Canada, the Anglos are great, where they don't go and do these things. And or this is just the Quebec issue, the Québécois, the separatists want to do this. So we purposefully, although CUTV was an English station, we decided that we're gonna broadcast at least half of our content when we're live from the street is in French. We're gonna switch between English and French as often as possible so we can let the people outside Quebec understand what's happening when they watch. And we also purposefully seeked out as many diverse voices on the street. So we purposefully picked out individuals of color when we're walking down the streets and looked for students of color. We purposefully picked out women to be interviewed on the street. We purposefully picked out indigenous people if we found them in the streets during the demonstrations to make sure that our messaging, just the way it's packaged, the programming in itself, presents a different reality that is possible. And that is actually why the viewers, the consumers, decided to watch CUTV and abandon the mainstream media to understand what's happening. And in the end, that is the only reason that the strike lasted for 6 months. It would have been over like every other strike before it in a month. And this is the only reason that the government resigned. So that's to tell you how much is important to, for me, for us, the issue of multilingual programming, multi-ethnic programming is not just because it is a need that we need to do, it's because it's part of our social strategy to effect social change, to break those solitudes and reach our goals of social change. So come ICTV, the project that we're working on right now, you probably heard over the week the way that community television is funded in Canada. The cable distributors are forced to be taxed 2% of their revenues to be directed towards the maintenance of a community TV station in each distribution zone. And in the case of Montreal and in Quebec in general, Videotron is the biggest cable distributor. And they have their access television network called MaTV. And we found that they were in total non-compliance. MaTV for over 20 years was refusing to produce any content in English, openly refusing to produce content in English to service the Anglo communities in Quebec. It has refused to produce any indigenous programming, and they had only one show that was an ethnic show, and it was called Colors the Sea, Colors Here. So the name of the show in itself was a derogatory racist thing. It told you, it connotated to you, the only time that you can see colored people is here, in this hour. And nowhere else could you see anybody of those communities. So we did a complaint at the CRTC in 2014. And we did a full study of the programming and proved, that this programming is non-compliant, it's not access, it doesn't represent the linguistic, ethnic, and Aboriginal representation of the community. And the CRTC, surprisingly, actually agreed with us in their ruling and found that Videotron is not complying even with one section of the whole policy. So here is a cable distributor wasting around $23 million a year. That's the budget of MATV on totally commercial content that doesn't represent any of the communities of Quebec. And so once we did that, unfortunately, the CRTC didn't go all the way, and they decided to give them another chance, although they found them in non-compliance, and they ordered them to come into compliance by August this year. And they didn't come into compliance in August, and the CRTC didn't do anything about it. But what we did right now is we did another study of not only the Montreal programming, but all of Quebec, MATV and all of Quebec, and we found that actually all of them are non-compliant, and we deposited a second complaint right now, and the CRTC actually just ordered Videotron to come into compliance. I'm going to quickly, there's a new process now for a complaint, and we'll have to mobilize the community to get it. Quickly about our vision for ICTV is with that same money, we can produce 24 hours of multilingual programming. We wanted it 50% French, 20% English, third language, and 15% bilingual content, because we live in a reality in Montreal that people switch between languages. Why can't we have bilingual content that is, meshed together? And native languages and issues, at least 10% of the content would be also in that. On the board of directors, we broke our board of directors by sector of the society. So we have the First Nations, the minorities and, municipalities and libraries, educational institutions, artistic and cultural organizations, community service organizations, independent and community media, labor unions, disabilities, and third language communities. And this all, the people that we mobilize are important in those sectors. So they have the support of all the umbrella organizations and so on behind them. Next slide. So I spoke a little bit about CUTV, but this is part of actually an extract from an article that got published about CUTV. By the way, there was 5 different PhDs that were written about the coverage on the CUTV's broadcast, live broadcast, because it was and it still is. There has not been anybody that copied neither the technological model or the programming model. But this is like, I'm going to leave you with this on there. Maybe you can read it yourself. But I would really emphasize that whenever we do community media, that we need to seek out to represent the diversity of the communities that we service. And this is a huge problem, not only in the community television sector, but also in the community radio sector, whether it's in programming, whether it's in boards, structures, and or representation on staffing. This is what's gonna make the difference in the end for what is the effect of the programming. The communities are thirsty for an alternative. They want you to produce that content that they are seeking. They are thirsty for it. And if you provide it to them, they will come and they will abandon the corporate and public media model that are failing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laith. I'm going to do a very rapid overview of CHO's strategies for multilingual programming and maybe highlight some of the challenges we faced, but we're time constrained. I'll be super quick, I promise. So CHO is unique in that the license that we were granted through the CRTC originally was Canada's first bilingual campus-based community station. And so our original promise of performance had 45% English, 45% French, and 10% other, which at the time the promise of performance specified as including 12 different languages than French and English. It's since changed, but that was our original mandate, and we've, I think, held true to that. Some of the challenges that we've faced trying to meet that is being able to promote third language programming, being able to evaluate show content, recruiting, being inclusive. Like how many languages can you possibly include and still meet that mandate? And of course, scheduling. So if you just can see what over the years has developed is that our, it should take you, our program grid reflects that a lot of the majority of our third language programming is happening on the weekends, where what we've found is it's not doing it. It's okay. Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. So what you'll see is throughout the week we have French and English interspersed, and then on the weekends is our third language programming, or maybe you won't see it. And what we found is that generally communities that have limited access to airtime, it made sense to do the programming on the weekend where more people might be available to hear it. We now have the advantage of technology that allows it to be on demand and people can listen to it at their own leisure. But when we were developing the program grid, that was one of the solutions we had for scheduling. That's okay. I'll just skip all those fancy links. So some of the other things that we've had over the years that we've tried is a third language policy. So programs that air in a third language would include an English or French component to make them a little bit more inclusive, but also it helps understand the content and the messaging of the show for us too. There's some samples, but we're going to skip right through those. That's okay. All right. Let's see if I can just wing it. Other things we've done is having a programming committee that has reached out to different community centers, bringing in people from those specific communities, which tends to happen for specific shows at a specific time. So we don't necessarily have a programming committee that incorporates a lot of languages all the time, but we want to review, let's say, our Haitian Creole show. We might go to that community center and have some feedback from that community on the ground. I guess for us, what we found is it's a combination of what feels right, but also who is in the room and who is participating. So in terms of figuring out what works for scheduling and promotion, that often has to come from within those volunteer contributors. That's the gist of it, I think. Yeah. It's, it would be actually all right to play that. Can you play the Somali show promo? So this is an example of bilingualism in action. Maybe.
Well, at least the page is moving.
It looks like it's going to do something. Well, I guess it's okay. We're going to keep going because we're low on time. We're going to move along, and Lisa Morin is next. Oh, thank you.
So before I start, I have a choice to do it in French or in English, and I'm going to do it in a multi-language just to prove to you what our region is capable of doing. And before I do start, I just want to give you just a little bit of history about myself. I'm originally English, and I met my husband 26 years ago, 31 years together, and he never spoke a word of English, and I never spoke a word of French. And to this day, I'm very proud to say I am fully bilingual, and I have 2 boys that are fully bilingual. So it's a big, big thing for me to promote within a region of bilingualism, because the 2 languages today are very important. So I just want to give you a little bit of history about TVCTK. I'm here to represent them. Formerly, it was known as CCTV 13, Canal Communautaire 13, because back in that time, we were on a channel 13. But going from analog to digital changed a few things, so we are now on 97. So we established ourselves with a local newspaper, Contact, better known for 2 languages, because you can say it in both ways, French or English, Contact, obviously. I'll go a little bit in French just to entertain you as well. Le canal communautaire de Témiscamingue, je suis très fière. On est un organisme avec 7 membres de conseil d'administration. Je suis la présidente. I am the president of the board of directors. I have been greatly involved. Ça fait 6 ans, je suis la présidente. So 6 years I've been the president, and over 10 years that I've been part of the board of directors. Let me tell you, back in the time, we had a board of directors of 7 members over 75 years of age. So culture, time, things are changing. The world is evolving. So technologie, ça change comme on voit. C'est très important qu'on suive qu'est-ce qu'on a, keep going with it, evolve with it. We've made a change of our board of directors voluntarily, a switch over. They were not forced off, so we'll make sure we clear that. And right now, the members of our board of directors, I have to say, I'm very proud to say that I have a VP, a retired VP on our board of directors who is IT, very IT, information technology. So thanks to him, we are live on an internet. We are TVCTK on an internet, and I have cards, and feel free to take these cards and check out our shows, because every show that we try to produce is bilingual. We do have a mission. We set out a mission, and the reason why we set out a mission is we wanted people to understand why the community channel exists in our region. Bear with me 1 second, it just logged off. Technical difficulties, as you were saying. Anyway, I apologize. I could read it actually in French, which is, for those of you who understand French, you'll understand the reason behind it. La télévision communautaire Témiscamingue-Kippawa was changed. TVCTK was switched in 2010. And the reason why we switched is we evolved to the internet. In the past, we were not on the internet. Now we are. So with the changeover with that, we decided to make a change of the name. So TV is what it stands for, C communautaire, or community, and TK stands for Témiscamingue, my region, Kippawa, which is a region within a region. Can you just do the next slide, please? Thanks. So we're 70 kilometers north of North Bay, or 4 hours to get here to Ottawa. Unfortunately, this morning it took me 6 because of a snowstorm, but I made it, and it's good. I just want to mention that our community channel, I'm very proud to also say we have live events. So on fait un téléthon, telethon that raises money to give back to the community. We are also, we do live bingos, we do video on demand. We are a cable distributor, local cable from Cablevision du Nord. I also want to mention that we are also part of the FEDEV TV, which is the Fédération des télévisions communautaires autonomes de Québec. I apologize if I made a mistake on that. Can you switch over, please? No. What I want to mention in the community is it's a bilingual community, and the French understand the English, and the English understand the French. Even if it's a little bit, they all seem to be uniform in understanding it. C'est pas mal bilingue dans le sens, nos émissions qu'on sort, moi-même, myself, I do interviews in French and I do English. I'm very proud of it because I don't want to lose what I've earned. I went back to school. As I mentioned, I was an English person. Later on in life, when I had my kids, I decided to go back to school and do the 2-year French, the French language grammar translation program. And if you're English, it's exceptionally hard. but it's important for me because everything that comes out to our community, whether it be we speak or we do interviews, we are trying to get we're at about 95% bilingual. We're trying to get 100% of our shows out fully bilingual. So je vais continuer en français et en anglais. Je voulais juste mentionner, the next one, yeah. So our fundraisers are quite something. We have local businesses in our town, les commanditaires qui aident. We also have 2 employees. I call them 2 permanent employees, but unfortunately, due to budget, I have a 1.5 employee. One is 35 hours, the other one is 25. However, they do about 60 hours a week of extra volunteer work. Pardon me. I also want to mention that we go out, on part de notre ville, extérieur de notre région. Un exemple, on peut aller dans les autres régions qui sont proches, nos voisins. Amos, Val-d'Or, we've been to Petawawa, we've been to Pembroke. We get ourselves out and about. We don't have a huge budget. We are basically working off of funding that comes in from government grants, our sales from our businesses. We have live bingo that we have a revenue that comes in. Every year we struggle to keep the community channel going. Nos émissions, c'est une grosse partie de la ville. C'est les gens de la ville. On a du monde qui sont dans beaucoup d'organismes. Ils passent des entrevues. As I mentioned, we have a lot of organizations in town that run events, and we are there at every single event possible. Every weekend, whether it's at night, whether it's in the day, nous sommes là toujours. We're always there. We're trying to be available as much as possible. Sorry, I'm just going to flip it. I had a note here, and it's important. I want to mention, on a des contraintes, excuse. What brings the interest of our public is, I mentioned the events around town. One of the shows we did, and it's a big thing, is Cultures Around the World. I'm from a small town, 3,200 people. So when I hear people compare from big cities and great funding and what they can produce, congratulations to you guys. We're a small town, so we have to work with what we have. The cultures, it's called Around the World, and the reason is the town that we're from has one mill, and it's a pulp and paper mill, and this mill employs a lot of different people from around the world. Sorry, I lost the train of thought. Mais c'est important pour nous parce que c'est important qu'on monte à les personnes. On est un petit ville. Le monde, il se voit et il dit bonjour, comment ça va? Mais dans les grosses villes, can you walk to your neighbor and say, well, good morning, how are you? Does it actually happen? I'm not sure. I hope it does. But I know in our community, we're big on this. And the community channel is huge on getting any type of aspect out there to speak, to show, to entertain, to anything that's possible out there that we can get a show, we're going to do it. We try to use our feedback, our comments. We've created a Facebook page because the reason why we did that, I know it's the social network of the world, we have to be out there to compete with what's out there. What we do is we upload to the Facebook to tell them what's on TV, what's happening on our community channel. We let them know. We also have the internet site that maybe we can have a moment after to show you just a quick thing of what goes on. We, on our internet site, sur l'internet, I have 1 minute. I'm good at that. I'll do that. You can upload it on your iPad, your Android. We have really evolved. Nous sommes avancés beaucoup. Notre studio, on avait commencé un petit studio, on a déménagé. We've changed to a bigger studio thanks to funding that came about. I also want to mention that we are for emergency state of our town. They go through our community channel. So if something happens, everything is put out to the community channel so everybody knows. So we use this as a big advantage. What I'd like to do is just click on just an example of the EGT Primaire, and it'll, our video issues, we know what's happening. We'll see what happens here. Oh, wow. So this is our site, and you can go on it at any time, and then the video didn't come up, which is okay. But it's French, it's bilingual, so c'est les deux langues. Tu peux aller choisir, tu peux aller voir des émissions, des archives are in there. And we're back up to 2010. Unfortunately, we couldn't archive before. We created this in 2010. And on a last note of that, we also have, in the shows in there, we have the bilingual shows that some are only English and some are only French. And we also have the bilingual ones. We have a hockey team that has players from Sweden, France, all around the world. And our stats go exceptionally high during a hockey game. Can you do a quick switch? Right here is a stat. Ça, c'est les statistiques. Quand est-ce c'est le plus occupé? When is it the most busiest? So November, as you see right now, we have a telethon coming up. And that telethon is where our stats go really high because people log in from everywhere to watch our telethon, to donate, to help donate back to the community. The other part, the far right, l'autre partie, it's all the shows that would have happened in a short time. So just to give you an example, we've evolved, but everything goes to the internet. Cable viewers get to view it first. We get to, as viewers, you view it first, excuse me, and then it goes on the internet for the people that are not cable viewers. I also, one last thing I do want to mention is that, sorry, I lost my train of thought here. Why? I lost my train of thought, and that's not good. Why? One of the things that we do is, in terms for fundraising for us, 5 years ago, I would have put the key in that door to our community channel, and I refused. Je voulais jamais barrer ça puis dire, c'est fini. I had to do everything in my power to keep that thing alive because it had evolved with revenue. Unfortunately, it had dropped, and then it plateaued. And we were at a point where we didn't know if we'd put the key in. And we went after everything possible that we can to keep it alive, to get funding. And I do rely on some of the grants. I do rely on our businesses. But one of the things that I'm very proud to say is I will not stop, and I will evolve the community channel with my board of directors, my 2 workers. It's called a team. And I work well with my team. And I'm very proud to say that TVCTK has come a long way.
Thank you, Lisa. And last but not least, we have John. And then we will have time for some questions. We are at 4:30, so we're going to eat into a little bit of the question time so that John can speak.
Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for having me here. I guess I would start, when we think about multilingual programming in First Nations territory, we start off as a backbencher right off the hop because the 2 official languages in Canada are, of course, French and English, and the original languages of the inhabitants from this Turtle Island, as we call it, don't get recognized in that source. So, but we can review the 50 years of footprints of in the language broadcasting and the progression of it in Canada. And we can look at it from our own network, which our network is the Anishinaabe Nation Territory, which spans from Manitoba to Quebec, north of the 101. And there's the three predominant languages are Cree, Ojibwe, and Oji-Cree. And you can tell that in some parts it's been preserved and enhanced, and in other parts there's been a deterioration or a complete loss of the language. So the loss of language obviously is attributed to some ill policies of past governments, and today we're left with the task of cleaning up what may have been decided on previous to our days. So, at the time, the leading propaganda in the old days was, with some families, specifically mine, when I asked my parent how come we didn't know the language, it was basically our grandparents did not want to deter or infect our parents with the language because they thought it was a detriment. It was better to know either English or French to get through, especially if there was communities where there was work, like lumber communities, forestry, any of where the working communities were. It was easier to speak French or English. So that is kind of instilled a shame in our families and communities about the use of language, and so it deteriorated quickly in some places. The places where there are more remote communities up north, where less contact with the Canadians, there was still that pride and of the language and culture, so it existed. So the living on the land went one on one with the language. So we're lucky enough to have in our network a lot of communities that still carry the language. But if we're talking about what works best for multilingual programming, the purpose, the benefits, the challenges, programming in the language, we have to assess what damage was created and made throughout our network. So studies need to be conducted. You need to go through, whereas like my colleague here, Anna from Wiki, they have a very strong language base, but 75 kilometers north of them, the language was almost lost in another community. So we can have one community helping another community to reclaim their languages, which would only then benefit the youth who are coming forward. So in some ways, it's like industrial mining. You mine the environment gets damaged, and you have to reclaim the land. So too is it in communications, where we have to have a reclamation, or more so, reconciliation, especially within the light of day that we are today. So in the community, there's also another reason to the loss of language, which was not necessarily to the ill policy, but the influx of English TV, radio, and recently internet. So we're basically competing with media to be able to keep our languages in our communities, because the only form of that coming in outside of Wawate and radio broadcast, TV and internet, is predominantly in English. So a solution a solution for that problem would be for a company like Wawate to take on television transmission undertakings and a wider array of media uses, or language in media uses. And that's, yesterday we visited Radio Jeunesse, which was the youth radio station at the Cultural Center. And I was ultimately impressed with seeing the young people broadcasting. I think the ages were from 12 to 21. And it was amazing to see them on the air. And I thought, this is, instead of reinventing the wheel, we can have that kind of programming in our communities, which would probably assist in a lot of the, and it'll be an alternative to some of the negative choices that our youth may be facing today. So, in saying that, once we were able to create in the community content, the language will in itself have its own reclamation, because television production, internet shows, newsprint and Roman orthography will be, translating or transliterating our language. And I think if we were to look at something that was like a good media production, would have been at Tanajuat, which was The Fast Runner. It was an Inuit story movie that was created by Paul Apak Aglik and directed by Zacharias Kunuk. I don't know if any of you seen this movie, but it's a riveting story of an old Inuit tale and the dynamics of the community. But what they did with the language was amazing because it, of course, the subtitles in English, but as you're reading the subtitles and the acting is so good, you're seeing the nuances of emotion brought through the language and acting, and how they suck you into the story so strongly. You know, there's a feeling while watching a movie that you almost want to learn, or you think you know the language because you're reading the subtitles. So it's amazing how media can bring back the language and show a passion towards it. So basically, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're merely using what we have in all realms of communication to be able to influx our languages into the multimedia platform. So this also coincides with restoring, language, law, and commerce within the language in our original languages in our community. And I think that was the basis of residential schools, was the fact that originally when the chiefs met to meet with the education ministers from Ontario, there was a need for the people to learn English for the continuance of language, law, and commerce in the First Nation communities. Somehow kind of went awry. So it didn't become, the exchange of languages, but more so a strict assimilation into the Canadian fabric, which fortunately didn't fully take, but it did alter our language, law, commerce, as well as our pedagogy, our values and principles were, ultimately changed or damaged in many ways. So that's another means of reclamation that comes through the use of language in media. So in our network, we're predominantly elders who listen to our radio broadcasts. And my colleague and I did a wellness study in a community last year and found that there was a language gap already beginning way up north, which was unseen, didn't exist up until the last 10 years. And it was because of this influx of English television and internet and print that the parents weren't teaching the youth the language. So the grandparents couldn't speak with the grandkids, and we created a generation gap of, lack of communication. And since the community is now implementing in-language teaching in their curricula for the youth starting in kindergarten, and it's amazingly how quick it's taking. And there's an exchange of elders and youth at the school to be able to ensure that the language is properly brought back to that generation. So, 2 minutes. Holy jeez. So essentially, we moved down to the residential school, the settlement agreement, which had the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and they had just very brief language and culture recommendations, which I'll read out, and then it should be done. So the TRC and the commissioners called upon the federal government to acknowledge that Aboriginal rights include Aboriginal language rights and should be as equal to French and English. They call upon the federal government to enact an Aboriginal Languages Act and incorporate the following principles that would declare Aboriginal languages are fundamental and valued element of Canadian culture, society, and there's an urgency to preserve them. Aboriginal language rights are reinforced by the treaties. The federal government has a responsibility to provide sufficient funds for Aboriginal language revitalization and preservation. The preservation, revitalization, and strengthening of Aboriginal languages and cultures are best managed by the Aboriginal peoples. And funding for the Aboriginal language initiatives must reflect the diversity of Aboriginal language. So in that, we obviously have to work with our Canadian partners and brothers and sisters, and that's the only way reconciliation will work in this light, and the best way to bring and preserve and enhance their languages, and then so we have something to broadcast through multimedia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? And if you do, could you please go to the microphone?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Than
question I had, it might be a bit off topic, but since residential schools were brought up as part of the conversation, I think you're being over generous in saying the intent was to educate in the first place. You know, my only kind of connection, I did a documentary on residential schools, but it was just from the British Columbia perspective. But still, my understanding is it was totally an intent just to destroy a culture. And I'm wondering if I could get a brief answer from those of you on the panel that have.
I worked in a residential school field before I worked with Wawate, and I'll tackle that. Yeah, of course. You know what? We can be negative and go right out, and it was a total outlash to you know, for genocide, cultural genocide. Well, and in many forms. But I think at this point, in order for, as an elder once told me, the idea of forgiving is how everybody's going to move forward. And it's forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, and especially a co-inhabiting forgiveness between Canadians and First Nations people. So I try to, I use the language lightly, and of course, you know, it could be heavily hammered down, but I don't think it serves a purpose. It doesn't serve, like if we keep bashing the same, we're kicking a dead horse. The horse is dead, and we got to, you know, finally bury it and let it go and move on. Like, I mean, and that's very strong words. And my father on his deathbed was ultimately tired. You know, his statement was, well, I guess it's cool to be Indian now, because he didn't have it as easy as we do today. And so, you know, I find myself wondering, like, if it was so hard for him, how harder was it for my grandmother, and then their parents and their parents? And each generation that comes along, we find that we're becoming a little more compassionate with each other. Yeah, there's still a lot of work to do, but I think we're on the right track, and we're moving forward. And I think that's probably the best way that all Canada will reconcile.
Hi, good afternoon, Kishimigwesh. I have a question for the first presenter of First Tell. What has been your, observation of people that are not necessarily Aboriginal or First Nations in terms of them wanting to learn the language spoken within your community and essentially familiarize themselves more with that language as part of a kind of bilingual conversation that doesn't necessarily include English and French?
We have a huge interest in individuals who are working with First Nations to learn the language and to be able to communicate with communities. Being that Wikwemikong is isolated, we have a number of non-native community outside members who come into the community. And there are some events that are totally in the language, and so when we're dealing with other individuals, yes, there is a strong interest for people to learn the language in our community, and I'm not sure if that's the same for in the north. I mean, myself, I'm not fluent in the language. I was a 60 scoop individual, and so I was taken from the community, and I have lost my language. But being that I'm immersed in the community of Wikwemikong, I do pick it up. I can understand it. I can understand when the elders and community members are speaking. And that's one of the things that is really nice when you go into Wikwemikong. No matter where you go in the community, you hear the language, and very, very much similar as in French. It's easier to say things in French if you're a French background than it is to say in English, and they find that the same way in the Aboriginal language, and you hear the laughter and and the humor within in the language when it's spoken. So, yeah, to be rich.
May I add a comment onto that?
Mhm.
Sorry, I'll go to the note. I'll just add a comment. In our region as well, I mentioned we were bilingual, French, English, and we do work with First Nations. And when they do their annual powwows, whatnot, it's in their language. We don't understand what they're saying, but you feel it when you're in the area. You feel exactly what's happening with them.
Okay. And I had one more question for the second presenter. Yes, I guess, what is, I guess, your opinion of why the media portrayed the student riots as rebellious as they did, when in fact there was a truer story to be told in it, and how did your community radio or, programming help to facilitate that natural conversation?
Well, obviously, the mainstream media is aligned in the positions of power in our society. So the public broadcasters usually support the positions of whatever government that they are funded by or controlled by. So in the case of CBC and RDI, the French service of CBC, they were, the majority of the content that was being produced about the strike and the Quebec Spring was from the point of view of those in government. So the Minister of Education says this. The Premier of the province wants that. The House of, the Assemblée Générale Nationale of Quebec does this. So that's the concentration of where, anyways, of any public broadcaster anywhere in the world, you will watch them. The priority is for the voices in the government. And the private sector in Quebec, again, the mainstream private sector, their interest was to raise the tuition fees, control the students, limit the education access, so you can have a cheaper labor market. That's part of the drive for that. So what has happened is that you saw total humiliation of the students. Specifically, the private sector was horrible in terms of the derogatory terms that they were using against the students. Especially a lot of these students, the majority of them were CEGEP students, meaning they're underage. 17 and 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds getting beaten up daily by the police in front of the media. Some of but anyway, so not to go too deep into what was the coverage or what the police did to these students. The way what we decided to do is that we were not going to produce content that is driven by the journalists. Okay, so we were out on the street. Only maybe 2% of the time or 5% of the time that you viewed the broadcast was the journalist giving you a recap or telling you what's happening in front of the camera. And then the rest of the time, it was interview after interview after interview of the people in the street. So we can hear the voices, the diversity of opinion. So it wasn't the political directive of CUTV's editorial position that was driving the messaging. It was the people. And after 6 months of Quebec watching its own self, its own community, telling in their own words and in such articulation, people, think that 17-year-old is not articulate or she is not articulate. They had all the necessary language to deliver the message, and that is in a way the main reason. If CUTV's broadcast was just HD and just running riot porn, meaning just showing you all the beating up and no messaging, it would have gotten 10% of that content. If the content was journalistic and just professional journalism, just like CNN, eventually, by the way, copied and bought the same equipment and when Ferguson demonstrations in the United States were signed, and they went down in the street, and you could see them using the same equipment. But all they did is report, and they're walking beside the demonstration, and people actually were pushing them out. So in the other side, what our achievement was, the minute people saw us 2 blocks down, you would hear them chanting, CUTV, we love you. The demonstration, when we entered it, it was like a red carpet for us, because this showed you that this media was rooted, was embedded with the community, and coming out of it. And that's the difference where in our messaging. And you see, here's the thing. We were actually very partial. We were biased, but we bore our bias proudly on our wrist. The mainstream media is biased. You see, the difference is when where journalism becomes problematic is when you lie and you say you're not biased. But if you come out and say, I am biased and we support the right to free education, then from that point on, the viewer understands your bias and then has the right to choose to take your side or not. I'm going to stop at that. Thank you.
We have one more question. Yep, absolutely.
My question, I mean, it's a half-baked thought, and I think from the meeting that we had earlier, I thought about it. You had said that for the ICTV proposal, you wanted 10% to be bilingual, like simultaneously bilingual, not like 9 to 10 is English, 10 to 11. And I think generally when we think of that bilingual, it's a conversation that's happening simultaneously in English and in French. I'm wondering what it would look like to have a bilingual programming that was maybe like an Aboriginal language and a South Asian language happening at the same time. I think, or like two different Aboriginal languages. I don't know how, I mean, or two different South Asian languages, or, Mandarin and Punjabi happening at the same, like what would that look like? Is that a possibility? And that seems exciting to me because it decenters English and French. And it also takes away English and French as being the mediator, right? Like we always think of, just in, historical colonialism as English and French being the mediator. So that, I don't know, has anyone thought about that kind of programming? Is that happening anywhere in Canada, in the States, or what? Yeah.
Well, I know that there's a play for us to try to team up with the ethnic media, so that there can be some cross. I was going to say cross contamination, but and in exchange for what's predominant out there with French and English, and right now we broadcast Cree and OG Cree from two different stations. So, but because of our uplink. We only have one uplink, so we can only actually have one language going out, each program. So, and that decentralizing the idea of English and French is something that's huge in our communities because, there's so much loss in translation, and there's we need transliteration because because of an oral history and how we use our language. Situations are explained. It's not exact meanings to one word has this meaning. It could be a sentence that would explain a situation that would be one word in the English or French language. So I will divert the rest of the question to Leif because I know that you can get this, but in our licensing we do have room for French, English, and an open slot for other languages as well as our own languages. So.
With CUTV during the strike on the street, it was just natural switching between English and French. And it was hilarious to actually, because the mainstream media was pushing, race hate between the English and the French specifically. You watched the English media at the time said, it's just Quebec. Those, Canada is better than that, the Anglos. And you watch the French media, even the ones that were supportive of the strike, they will be like, it's Quebec exceptionalism. Okay, so both sides were offering a supremacist vision of their identity. Okay, both mainstream medias were doing that. So what was surprising and invigorating is to be down on the street and the journalists of CUTV, they were all volunteers. Some of them spoke English, some of them spoke French, some of them were bilingual. But they would switch who's in front of the camera. So suddenly the person who's in English comes and starts asking a question in English, and the citizen on the street is a francophone that doesn't speak any French, zero. And you heard Quebecois persons who are in the middle of this strike say, "I'm really sorry, my English is horrible. Can I speak in French?" And the French reporter comes up, and yes, of course, anything you need as a citizen. And then all these people from Alberta and all across the country came to Montreal. All the students from across the country wanted to join. They're all Anglos. They've never spoken French word. And then suddenly they're faced with a French journalist asking them that question. And they had that same response. "I'm really sorry. I don't know speak French well. Is it possible?" So this was, you understood that this taking this nationalistic identity around language by community, this milieu allowed just people watching CUTV understood that this is beyond only ethnicity. And I'm gonna leave with one more example. We did a live, like Saturday Night Live. We did a show that was live on stage, a multi-arts and culture, show with comedians, musicians, and improv troops and so forth. And it was bilingual, the whole show. The hosts, 2 comedians, in front of a live audience and broadcasted live. So we did the whole formula of Saturday Night Live, but in a bilingual way. And the 2 comedian hosts would talk to each other. One would talk in French, the other would talk English, and they will continue the conversation. They wouldn't even, it was a perfect example of what Montreal culture is. So that's very possible. In the third language issue, I don't know, there's going to be a lot of technicality on that, especially the CRTC will come running with their guns when you get two ethnic languages.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. We are a little bit past 5. I want to say thank you to Emery Sanford, Laith Marouf, John Gagnon, and Lisa Morin for your time, and everyone for joining us today. Thank you. If anyone wants the contact information, Laith is putting it up on the board for people to share.